Experts discover an old photograph of three children from 1890. When they enlarge it, they are stunned. What you are about to see defies all logic. But before you continue, if you want more historical discoveries that will leave you speechless, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Like this video if you believe there are unsolved mysteries waiting to be discovered. In October 2023, two Boston collectors made a discovery that would change their understanding of 19th century photography. Emma Richardson and Jake Sullivan attended a routine auction of the Whitmore family estate, searching for vintage photo albums for their antique business. Lot 247 appeared ordinary. 6 Victorian-era family albums for $350. However, while examining their purchase, they found something unexpected: a black leather album with faded gold lettering reading St. Mary's Children's Home, 1888. When they opened it, the pages creaked, revealing sepia photographs of orphanage children. The children were posed in orderly rows, dressed in simple uniforms, their faces serious. Following the photographic conventions of the era, these photos are typical of 19th century charity institutions, Emma remarked as she turned the pages. She had seen hundreds of similar images, orphans documented for administrative records or fundraising campaigns. But on page 23, something caught her attention. A group photograph showed around 40 children standing in front of a brick building. At first glance, the image seemed normal, but something in the background unsettled her. Upon closer inspection, she noticed one child with a strangely modern expression. "Jake, look at this child in the back," Emma said, pointing to the figure. "His posture and expression don't fit the era." Jake leaned in to examine the photograph. The child wore a casual, relaxed smile, completely different from the formal seriousness of the others. His eyes seemed to look directly at the camera with a confidence uncommon among institutionalized children in 1888. "It's strange," Jake admitted, "but maybe he was just naturally photogenic." Still, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Their search for answers had begun. They decided to digitize the photograph in high resolution to examine it more closely. On their computer, they magnified the image and studied every detail with precision. What they discovered left them baffled. The child not only had an anachronistic expression, but was also holding something that clearly didn't belong in. 1888. It appeared to be a small rectangular object resembling a modern device. "This can't be real," Jake murmured as he adjusted the image contrast. "Is that a cell phone?" Emma examined the object carefully. It was small, rectangular, and seemed to have a smooth, reflective surface, while the quality of the 1888 photograph prevented perfect clarity. The shape looked unmistakably modern. "It can't be a phone," Emma reasoned. "But it's definitely not something from the 19th century." They searched for rational explanations. Perhaps it was a small photographic plate, a pocket mirror, or an artifact from the developing process. Yet the more they studied the image, the more convinced they became that the object was anachronistic. They consulted experts in historical photography. Dr. Robert Chen, a professor of photography history at Harvard, agreed to analyze the image. After a detailed examination, he confirmed that the photograph was authentic to the period. The materials development technique and paper type all correspond to 1888, Dr. Chen explained. There are no signs of later digital manipulation. "But what about the object the child is holding?" Emma asked. Dr. Chen frowned. "It's unusual. I don't recognize it within the context of the era. However, old photographs can sometimes capture objects that appear anachronistic due to image quality or lighting effects." His explanation didn't fully satisfy Emma and Jake. They decided to investigate St. Mary's Orphanage itself to better understand the photograph's context. They visited the Boston Historical Archives. where archivist Margaret Foster provided them with a box of documents related to St. Mary's Children's Home. The orphanage operated from 1875 to 1923 and was a Catholic institution that housed orphaned and abandoned children. From the Boston area, the records revealed basic information. The orphanage typically housed between 80 and 120 children, was run by the Sisters of Charity, and received funding from private donations and municipal sources. But while reviewing the documents more carefully, Emma found something troubling. An 1889 inspection report mentioned irregularities in children's records and discrepancies between the number of residents reported and those observed during official visits. What kind of irregularities? Jake asked. Emma read from the report. During the inspection on March 15, 1889, approximately 45 children were observed in the dining hall. However, official records listed only 38 residents. When questioned about the discrepancy, the Mother Superior explained that some children were visiting potential adoptive families. Another document from 1890 described complaints from families who had adopted children from St. Mary's. These families claimed the children displayed strange and inexplicable behaviors. One father wrote, "My adopted son seems to know things that a child his age shouldn't know, especially about current events and technologies." "It's strange," Jake commented. "How could an orphan child from 1890 know about technologies of the era?" The investigation grew more intriguing when they discovered the personal diary of Sister Catherine Ali, who had managed the orphanage from 1885 to 1895. "Some of our children are different," she wrote in 1888. "They possess knowledge and behaviors that do not correspond to their upbringing here. It is as if they had lived previous, more complex lives." Emma and Jake exchanged glances. Was she suggesting that some children were not what they appeared to be? They continued reading. "The child Thomas particularly disturbs me. He occasionally speaks of flying machines and lights that work without fire. When I ask where he learned these things, he says he remembers them from before." The description matched the child in the photograph who had first caught their attention. Dr. Foster directed them to a special section of the archive containing the orphanage's medical records. These documents were better preserved and offered more detailed insight into daily life at St. Mary's. The orphanage physician, Dr. William Hartwell, had kept meticulous health records, but his notes revealed unsettling observations. Patient Thomas Mackenzie, estimated age 8, Emma read from an 1888 medical file, shows normal physical development but extraordinarily advanced cognitive knowledge. Describes medical procedures not taught in elementary institutions. Jake found another equally disturbing entry. Patient Mary Sullivan, age 10. During examination, described internal anatomical details with precision expected only of someone with advanced medical education. When asked about the origin of this knowledge, she claimed to remember it from her previous family. Dr. Hartwell had documented a dozen children with similar traits between 1887 and 1891. All demonstrated exceptional intelligence, anachronistic knowledge, and an understanding of the world that exceeded their formal education. "I have observed that these particular children adapt quickly to new situations and show unusual resistance to common illnesses," the doctor wrote. "It is as if they possess previous experiences that prepared them for institutional life." Even more disturbing, Dr. Hartwell noted that these children often disappeared without explanation. Of the 12 children with exceptional characteristics, only 3 were officially adopted. The remaining 9 simply vanished from the records, with no documentation of transfer or adoption. Thomas Mackenzie no longer resides at the institution as of October 20, 1890. One note stated, "There are no adoption or transfer records." Sister O'Malley indicates a family came for him, but I cannot locate corresponding documentation. Emma and Jake began to suspect that something far more complex was happening at St. Mary's. These special children appeared to have mysterious origins and equally inexplicable destinations. Do you think these children were different in some way? Jake asked. Emma studied the original photograph again. Or maybe someone placed them there intentionally. They decided to visit the site where St. Mary's Children's Home had once stood. The building had been demolished in 1925, but municipal records identified its former location in Boston's North End. A modern condominium complex now occupied the area, though a small commemorative plaque briefly mentioned the orphanage. As they examined the plaque, an elderly local resident, Michael O'Brien, approached them. "My grandfather lived on this street when the orphanage was still here," O'Brien said. "He always told strange stories about that place." Emma and Jake immediately asked what kind of court stories. He said his grandfather occasionally saw children entering and leaving the building at odd hours, children who dressed differently from the others. He also mentioned that lights were sometimes visible in the windows long after everyone was supposed to be asleep. Brian invited them to his home to show them family documents. His grandfather had been a local merchant who kept detailed records of neighborhood events. "Here it is," O'Brien said, showing them an 1889 diary. September 15th, again. "I saw unknown children near the orphanage after nightfall. They wore clothes I do not recognize and seemed to be waiting for something or someone." Another entry stated, "The orphanage children I see during the day are different from those who occasionally appear at night. The nocturnal ones seem more aware of their surroundings and less institutional in their behavior." Jake asked if there were additional records. O'Brien brought out a box of family papers containing correspondence between his grandfather and other local merchants. One 1890 letter mentioned, "Orphanage suppliers report inconsistent orders. Some months they request supplies for 120 children. Other months for only 80, with no clear explanation for the variations." Emma began forming a theory. What if some of the children were not permanent residents? What if they came from somewhere else temporarily? But from where? Jake asked. And why? Answering those questions would require deeper investigation into the mysteries surrounding St. Mary's through genealogical research. Emma and Jake located descendants of several children who had lived at St. Mary's. The first family they contacted was Margaret Sullivan Chen, the great-granddaughter of Mary Sullivan, one of the girls mentioned in Dr. Hartwell's medical records. "My great-grandmother always told strange stories about her years at the orphanage," Margaret said during their meeting at a Cambridge cafe. She spoke of special visitors who occasionally appeared to help the children. Emma showed her the photograph that had started their investigation. Margaret examined it carefully. "My great-grandmother is in this photo," she said, pointing to a girl in the second row. "But she always said there were other children at the orphanage who never appeared in the official photographs." "What do you mean by that?" Jake asked. According to Margaret, some children arrived only for short periods, usually during times of crisis or emergency. These children seemed to know exactly what to do to help, as if they had been there before. Margaret shared more family stories. During an influenza epidemic in 1889, several children appeared who knew medical care techniques the sisters did not. They helped save many lives and disappeared as soon as the crisis passed. The second family offered equally intriguing information. Robert Mackenzie, a descendant of Thomas Mackenzie from the medical files, possessed documents passed down through generations. "My great-great-grandfather kept a simple diary after leaving the orphanage," Robert explained. He wrote about his memories of St. Mary's, including children who appeared during emergencies. Thomas Mackenzie's diary, written in 1920, contained vivid recollections. "I remember children who arrived during difficult nights. They knew things we didn't: methods to keep food fresh longer and techniques to heat the dormitories more efficiently. When we asked where they came from, they said other institutions, but never specified which ones. The third family provided the most significant piece of the puzzle. Jennifer O'Malley Walsh, a descendant of Sister Catherine Ali, had access to the nuns' personal documents that were never officially archived. My great-great-grandmother wrote private letters to her sister about events at the orphanage, Jennifer explained. These letters were never meant for official records, so they are more honest about what really happened. One letter from 1888 revealed, "Dear sister, I must tell you about the special children who occasionally appear here. They arrive without official documentation, always during moments when we need them most. It is as if someone knows exactly when to send them." Another letter described, "These children not only possess advanced knowledge, but seem to understand our needs before we express them. It is as if they studied our situation in detail before arriving." With all the evidence collected, Emma and Jake began developing a theory about what had truly happened at Presu. My only lipstick, Ruby Kiss. Ruby Kiss, only Ruby Kiss. Only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture that my listing sapatistry contend. Alan Molesque, like semisicat.mat. E6T, my cellus, my life, my lies tiv. AC6, my live, my sixt, my live, dot sep, c malef, go I lees, my se caplit, by my, kalita ase with the senisad, the mulai musada gabai pises, de me it's it we see gabai katilubsk, the t set it St. Mary's Children's Home. They met again with Dr. Robert Chen from Harvard to present their findings. "The patterns are consistent," Emma said, showing a timeline they had created. Every time the orphanage faced a crisis: epidemics, food shortages, financial troubles, children appeared with specific knowledge to resolve those problems, Jake added. And they always disappeared once the crisis passed, leaving no trace in the official records. Dr. Chen reviewed the material carefully. "This is extraordinary. It suggests some form of organized effort to provide targeted help to the orphanage. But who could have organized something like that?" Emma asked. "And how did they know exactly when help was needed and what kind of help to send?" Perhaps there was a network of institutions sharing resources and knowledge. Dr. Chen suggested, noting that philanthropic organizations of the era sometimes operated in coordinated ways. However, further research revealed no evidence of such a network. No other institutions reported similar patterns, and there were no records of formal communication between St. Mary's and neighboring orphanages. Emma then proposed a different theory. What if there was a secret organization dedicated specifically to helping St. Mary's? St. Mary's, Jake asked. Maybe a group of wealthy benefactors trained children for specific missions, Emma suggested. That would explain the specialized knowledge, Jake admitted. But why the secrecy? And why only St. Mary's? Their investigation of financial records revealed something notable. Between 1887 and 1892, the orphanage received significant anonymous donations that always arrived shortly before or after the crises they had identified. Someone was monitoring the orphanage very closely, Emma concluded, closely enough to know exactly when and what kind of help to send. Dr. Chen encouraged them to dig deeper. "You should examine records from other institutions of the era to see if similar patterns exist," he advised, "and investigate wealthy Boston families who may have had the resources to organize such a program." Their theory began to take shape. A well-funded, organized group had operated in secrecy, providing targeted assistance to St. Mary's by deploying specially trained children on short-term missions. Emma and Jake expanded their investigation to other Boston charitable institutions from the same period. They visited archives of orphanages, hospitals, and schools, searching for similar anomalies. What they found was revealing. Boston Children's Hospital had reported the occasional appearance of young volunteer assistants during medical emergencies between 1888 and 1893. These youths displayed advanced medical knowledge but disappeared without leaving employment records. The Industrial School for Girls documented visits from exchange students who taught more efficient sewing and cooking techniques. Yet no records identified where they came from. "It's a pattern," Jake observed. Someone was sending specifically trained young people to institutions in need. Their search of wealthy Boston family records led them to the New England Philanthropic Society, a private organization that coordinated charitable efforts among the region's wealthiest families. In the Society's archives, they discovered references to a specialized assistance program directed by an anonymous committee of benefactors. The Specialized Assistance Program has demonstrated remarkable effectiveness in institutional crises. Emma read from an 1891 report. Program participants receive intensive training in specific skills before being assigned to short-term missions. Jake found further details. Participants are selected for exceptional intelligence and adaptability. Training includes accelerated education in basic medicine, food preservation techniques, teaching methods, and crisis management. The program operated from a private property outside Boston. Those specific location details had been redacted. "This explains everything," Emma said. The special children at St. Mary's were participants in this secret training program. Dr. Foster, who had assisted throughout the investigation, added important historical context. During the 1880s and 1890s, Boston's wealthy families sought to professionalize charity. They believed traditional philanthropy was inefficient and wanted more scientific approaches to helping the poor. This program would have emerged from that philosophy. Instead of just donating money, she explained, they invested in training people to solve institutional problems. Eventually, Emma and Jake located the property where the Specialized Assistance Program had operated. Land records showed it belonged to the Thornton family, one of Boston's wealthiest dynasties of the 19th century. The site, now a state park, still contained the foundations of several buildings demolished in the 1920s, with permission from park authorities. They conducted a limited archaeological excavation. They uncovered physical evidence of the program, buried educational materials, including advanced medical textbooks, food preservation manuals, and teaching guides, all dated between 1885 and 1895. More importantly, they found photographs of the program in operation. The images showed young people, the same age as the children from St. Mary's, engaged in intensive training medical instruction, cooking techniques, and problem-solving exercises. "Here it is," Jake said, pointing to a photograph of about 20 youths posing in front of a training building. "These are the special children from St. Mary's." Emma recognized several faces from the orphanage photographs. They were not ordinary orphans. They were students in a philanthropic training program. The final documents revealed the program's full structure. Participants were selected from regional orphanages for their exceptional intelligence, taken to the training center for periods ranging from 6 months to 2 years, and then deployed on specific missions. Program graduates will be temporarily placed into institutions facing specific crises. Emma read from a program manual. Their specialized training allows them to provide effective solutions while maintaining their cover as ordinary residents. Once the mission is completed, graduates will be relocated to carefully selected adoptive families or returned to the program for further training. The program operated successfully for nearly a decade before being discontinued in 1895. Records indicated that changes in child labor laws and increased public scrutiny made continued operation unfeasible. "It's brilliant," Jake admitted. They used the existing orphanage infrastructure to conceal a specialized crisis response training program. Emma studied the original St. Mary's photograph again, focusing on the child holding the strange object. It was likely some kind of tool or instrument he learned to use during his training. The investigation revealed not a supernatural mystery, but an innovative social program that had operated in secret during the American Gilded Age. Emma and Jake presented their findings to the Boston Historical Society at a conference attended by historians, genealogists, and descendants of families connected to St. Mary's. Their research uncovered a previously unknown chapter in the history of American philanthropy. The Specialized Assistance Program represents an early experiment in what we now call evidence-based philanthropy, Emma explained during her presentation. Rather than relying on traditional charity, these wealthy families invested in systematic solutions to social problems. Dr. Foster added historical perspective. This program anticipated modern approaches to social work and crisis management by decades. The participants were essentially specialized social workers, trained nearly a century before the profession was formally recognized. Descendants of the involved families responded with a mix of pride and astonishment. Margaret Sullivan Chen remarked, "Now I understand why my great-grandmother always said her time at St. Mary's was special. She wasn't just an orphan, she was part of an innovative program." The investigation also clarified the fate of many participants. Records showed that after completing their missions, most were placed with carefully chosen adoptive families, often middle-class households that valued education. Many of these children later became leaders in their communities. Jake explained. Doctors, teachers, social workers, reformers. The program didn't just solve immediate crises, it helped create a generation of civic leaders. Dr. Robert Chen of Harvard announced plans to establish a research initiative to further study the program's methods. The training approaches they developed may have modern applications in disaster response and humanitarian work. He noted. Emma and Jake donated all photographs and documents to the Smithsonian Institution, where an exhibition on philanthropic innovation in 19th century America was created. The original St. Mary's photograph became the exhibition's centerpiece. This research reminds us that history is filled with innovators who worked outside traditional systems. Emma reflected at the exhibition's opening. The Specialized Assistance Program was decades ahead of its time, Jake added. And it shows that some historical mysteries have extraordinary, yet entirely earthly explanations. The photograph that began the investigation now hung in the museum with a new explanatory plaque. St. Mary's Children's Home, 1888. This image documents both regular orphanage residents and participants in the Specialized Assistance Program, an innovative philanthropic experiment that trained young people to resolve institutional crises. The child holding the once mysterious object was identified as Thomas Mackenzie, who had completed specialized medical training and was sent to St. Mary's during an influenza epidemic. The object in his hand was a primitive medical instrument he had learned to use during his training. The story of St. Mary's ended not as an unsolved mystery, but as a testament to the innovation and dedication of philanthropists who worked in secrecy to improve the lives of society's most vulnerable. Their legacy lived on through generations of public servants and in the lessons their methods continue to offer modern humanitarian workers.